there seems to be a growing sense in the global community, and certainly among Palestinian civil society, that the two-state solution is actually not only undesirable, but non-viable.
Right.
Because of settlement expansion, because of Israel's refusal to stand down on this claim of greater Israel, all of it is ours. That really there's a one-state reality that can only be repaired with a one-state solution, a single secular democratic state.
Yeah, I think that right now there's an overwhelming sentiment in the world to implement the two-state solution, which has been on the table and is embodied in probably dozens of UN General Assembly and Security Council resolutions over many, many decades. On both sides of this divide, which is a terrible, brutal divide, there is a one-state solution. Of course, many in Palestine say one state, Palestinian majority, and that's it. On the Israeli side, we know this current government is for one state, completely an Israel-dominated state. My view is that, practically speaking, these two sides do not get along, and there maybe in future generations, someday they will get along. But for the moment, the right answer is the one that has been embodied in resolution after resolution, but never enforced. And I agree, we're coming to the end of that road. The UN Security Council is getting ready for a vote on Palestinian membership in the UN based on the two-state solution.
What does that mean? Talk to me about what that means as a practical matter. Perhaps recognition of Palestine as a state, membership
that would be
status.
phenomenal.
It'd be phenomenal. But you still have Netanyahu who's saying, perhaps as a pretext, but that post-October 7th, we can't even have a conversation about a two-state solution, that a permanent, durable solution has to include Israel having security control over Gaza and over the West Bank. If that's the case, then is this all just for nothing?
No, because I don't think Netanyahu has the final word in this. I think the world community has the final word. And if we find, as I believe to be the case, that there's an absolutely overwhelming global sentiment, this war has to stop. Israel has to stop killing the people of Gaza. The two sides do not have to trust each other, love each other, like each other, even tolerate each other, but they have to coexist side by side without the killing. I think that this means saying to Netanyahu and this extremist government, if you can't implement that, it's going to be a different one onward, but this is the will of the international community under the UN Charter. And that, I believe...
Israel doesn't find the UN Charter very persuasive.
Yes, but Israel depends entirely on the U.S. backing to repudiate the UN Charter.
So that's the point that I want to drill down on a little bit. It seems to me that it's far more important for the United States to assert its power than for the international community. Israel says, hey, ICJ, we don't care. ICC, we don't care. Geneva Conventions, not so important. But if Biden makes that call and says, hey, no more money, hey, no more vetoes.
I would put even more explicitly, just no more bombs.
Fair enough.
You can't fight tomorrow without our munitions, which is literally the case. So I think that's right. The U.S. will not do that just on its own by saying, oh, it would be nice to have a two-state solution. It will not do that. On the other hand, if the overwhelming global majority says that's the right way, then the U.S. has a different choice.
Hasn't that always been the case? I mean, for the last few decades, hasn't the global community effectively spoken out against the settlements in the West Bank, effectively said that funding for Israel should be conditional upon human rights abuses going away, but we still see the siege in Gaza?
Yes.
The international community hasn't been unclear about this.
No, I agree. It has not been unclear, and the U.S. has been temporizing, protecting Israel, and delaying up until now. Now we have, I believe, a genocide underway. I think it is absolutely a disaster, and I think the world community is more alarmed and more shocked and more saying, if we are anything as a world community, we have to implement what we've said. An example, the vote on membership is a vote that should have happened 13 years ago.
Absolutely.
Because this was an application by the Palestinian Authority in 2011 for membership. When you make that application, it goes to an admissions committee, a new members committee, which is constituted by the UN Security Council. They did all the work. They said Palestine qualifies. The U.S. blocked it. And the U.S. blocked it, saying, it's not quite right now, not quite time, but take observer status. That's pretty good, and soon enough you'll be a member. Now we're 13 years later. There is a genocide underway in Gaza. There is the risk of a wider war. It's true. You could say, well, Mr. Sachs, wasn't all of this true 13 years ago? I would say, yes, it was true 13 years ago. But 13 years later, the dangers to the whole world are much greater, and the prevarications of the United States are so much more evident as well. So to my mind, I want to give another push. Okay, United States, you said back in 2011, it's going to happen quickly. We're farther and farther away because you have backed something that is against international law. You have sided repeatedly on the ground with Israel, even though it's direct violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. I want to push so that we actually live like responsible grown-ups, saying what we say, we do. We have international law, we apply it. And I think this is a moment, if again it fails and fails, well, you're absolutely right. This will go down in history as A, a disaster, and B, as a long period of hypocrisy of shocking dimension, and C, somebody will have to come up in the next generation with different answers. But right now we have an answer that is viable, workable, practicable, and the question is for the United States, are you going to apply what the whole world says is needed and what the U.S. itself says is needed, or are you going to continue to fake it? My basic argument to the U.S. is it's no good for the U.S., but it's also no good for Israel. Israel's legitimacy is shot by all of this. You go around the world, as I do all the time, people are aghast at what Israel is doing, and young people around the world are saying, what the heck is this? This kind of government has no legitimacy at all. And so Israel needs to change for its own survival. That's my own view.
Talk to me about the short term. We understand the kind of long-term goals here around statehood, around kind of creating a kind of global peace. But in the short term, people are dying and
Absolutely.
people are starving. How do we get to a ceasefire right now?
The reason we don't have a ceasefire right now is actually the long term, strangely enough. There's no endpoint even agreed. That's why Israel won't even agree to a permanent ceasefire. It says maybe ceasefire for 3 weeks or 6 weeks. Hamas says, well, that just means they're going to come back and slaughter us 6 weeks from now. Why doesn't Israel agree to something longer? Because then people ask, well, what is longer? And when Israel says, well, we're in control, no, that can't be longer. That's not an answer. So you have to have a point on the horizon where you're heading. That's why I want to clarify that by saying two-state solution, Palestine, member of the United Nations. We know where we're heading. There are a lot of details to work out in implementation, but we know where we're heading. So we're not arguing, BB, about that anymore. It's not what you care, what you say, what Smotrich says, what Ben-Gvir says about 2 states, 1 state, 3 states, greater Israel. That's done. The world's spoken. We know where we're going. Now we have to stop the fighting. To my mind, that will become absolutely directly more clear once that direction is settled. So I see it actually that many times, if even you want to start your hike up the mountain, you have to know where we're heading so you know what path you're going to follow. Once Palestine is voted in, I hope this week, really hope the United States does not block this again, because it would block it standing against the entire world.
That may be political
community.
Suicide for Biden.
I think it would be. And so I'm hoping they have enough sense. Of course, these advisors need to recalibrate everything that they ever learned in politics, but they need to get this right. Then, okay, what's the point of the war anymore? Because now we have Palestine entering the UN by the way, the clause is, as a peace-loving nation, you have to accept the UN Charter. You enter as a peace-loving nation. That actually means something. It means that all of the countries in the region are oriented towards Israel's security as well as the Palestinian state security. So everybody has to take practical steps as soon as that happens. The Saudis, UAE, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, and Israel and the United States, all the rest. Okay, we have to stop the arms flows. We have to stop the killing. We have to start with the emergency services once again. We have probably 1 million people on the brink of starvation right now, so there needs to be massive, massive infusions of emergency food aid. Of course, this could start immediately if there is a political framework. There is not going to be a political framework on a process in which it's surely not this Israeli government, but I don't think any Israeli government in the near future is going to, quote, negotiate this. But the world can say, this is international law. This is how it's going to be. Stop your dreams of greater Israel. We're moving to the two-state solution.